Good morning. Welcome to worship with the community of First Unitarian Church of Omaha. I'm Reverend Shari Woodbury, the congregation's minister. Whether you are attending online or in person, I'm glad you have chosen to join us this morning. A special welcome to visitors. This congregation is a community of all ages and abilities. It's a community of diverse cultural and class backgrounds. It's a community with a rainbow of gender and sexual identities. We draw from many sources of inspiration and share common liberal religious values. Whoever you may be, we invite you to bring your whole self into this space. Visitors are invited to fill out a visitor form. If you're in the pews, it's a yellow form in the hymnal racks. If you're online, you'll find a link to an online form below the service description on YouTube. One announcement today on food assistance. Food costs continue to rise, and delays and changes in the SNAP program are reducing food security for many Americans. If this has affected your household, please reach out to the church, the caring team coordinators, or me. We have resources that we can share if you would like some confidential assistance. We don't want any family to go without food. I also want to affirm that our church occupies the traditional treaty lands of the Omaha and Otoe-Missouri tribal nations, and we express our respect as well to the Northern Ponca, Winnebago, and Santee Sioux tribes. We encourage everyone to support local causes, charities, and rights of Indigenous peoples. Again, welcome to worship, and welcome back to the Oregon bench, Rick Richards. At this time, I invite forward Lita Magisana to light the flaming chalice. As she does so, will you join me in the chalice lighting words? Spark of the Spirit, cupped in earth's embrace, light of love, alive in all creation, as we kindle this flame, we rekindle our connection to the sacred web of life.
In Need of Healing by Maureen Killoran. Welcome, you who come in need of healing, you who are confused or have been betrayed. Welcome with your problems and your pain. Welcome too your joys and your wonderings. Welcome your need to hope, your longing for assurance. Instead of answers, may you find safety for your questions here. Instead of promises, may you find community for your struggles, people with hands and hearts to join you in engaging the challenges and changes of our day.
I invite you to rise if that feels good in your body and join in our opening hymn. I invite forward anyone who is young or young at heart and would like to help out with the Time for All Ages and figure out what this Tower of Blocks is all about.
Good morning. I'm Christina Strong. I'm coordinator of child and family programs here at First Unitarian. And today we are talking about covenant. Do any of you remember from your classes what covenant is?
I know what covenant is. It's togetherness.
Okay, togetherness. What else?
Oh.
It's usually a lesson that we do at the start of the school year. We talk about covenant and then we build it together. Is that bringing up any memories for you? So our covenant is the promises that we make to each other about how we're going to treat each other and how we're going to behave in our community, right? They're not just words. Usually we put them on a poster or a page in our room or on the bulletin board. I think they've been in the elementary room, but they're not just words on the page. They're They're what holds us together as a community in our classrooms and here at First Unitarian. They're our agreement about how we will treat each other and the work that we'll do together and how we'll show up for each other. So this is going to represent our community, all the pieces working together to build something. Can I have a few people volunteer to be a covenant? Come here. Okay, let's get you, and let's get one over here, and back there in the red. All right, go ahead and stand up here. Go ahead and stand up. All right. And then I'm gonna have you each here. Can I have like one person here and one person here? All right. And back up just a little bit so our audience can still see. Your covenant keeper. Oh, do you wanna, yeah, if you wanna wear yours on your back so everyone can see, you wanna put yours on your back? There you go. All right. So
That way everybody can see. Covenant keeper.
our covenant does occasionally require some hands-on work, but a lot of times it's just like an invisible force that we do with our minds and our words and our actions. So if I could have you back up a little bit and just kind of like hold our community with the force of covenant, right? And we'll see what happens. So sometimes our community can get a little bit shaky. Maybe we're growing and adding new people. Maybe someone has big feelings or makes a mistake. And that's normal. Every community goes through that and feels wobbly. But when we live our covenant, the force, we can help steady the tower. Right. Does anyone use your hands to help steady the tower a little bit? There you go. It does require hands-on work sometimes. Okay. All right. And sometimes change happens quickly, like two big things happen at once, and everything gets a little bit wobbly. But can we keep rebuilding? Rebuild our community and steady the community with our covenant. All right. Sometimes we lose something we care about, like a beloved tradition might change or a leader might leave, something that seems really important and necessary might change. And we can still use our covenant to keep our community steady. And sometimes something new comes along, maybe a new family or a new idea or a new class or a new tradition or just a new way of doing things. Do you think we can find room for this on our tower? All right. And sometimes we intentionally take something apart so that we can build something new. And sometimes we don't even know what it's going to look like when we get started. But again, the way that we treat each other and the way that we agree to be together and build together helps keep everything stable even when it changes. And sometimes there's a really different kind of change, something that really surprises us and something that we never expected and is a lot different than we've ever been. And yet, our covenant keeps all of our pieces working together, all of our community, and we can still remain strong even if we're in a different shape than what we started. Should we see if we're still stable? We are still standing. And I want to leave you with just one more image here and something about why it's important that we practice covenant in our communities, in our small communities like our classroom, in our larger communities like our church. So while I was practicing to tell you this story today, my orange cat, who thinks he's the ruler of the universe, bumped up against our community like probably 100 times and headbutted it and hit it with his tail and rubbed up against it. And even through all that, all the pieces work together to keep our community strong. So sometimes we have external forces outside of our community that bump up against us, but as long as we keep our promises to each other in small groups and larger groups, that reminds us that we can all work together to stay strong even when things happen inside our community or things happen outside of our community that affect us. Thank you so much for being our covenant today. I was going to shake your hand. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so now you can go to your classes, and our elementary is going to do some more work with our tower here. And if you're in middle school, they also have a lesson ready for you there. There you go. Thank you so much. Can I have that box?
And we'll sing them up. Christina gets that ready for the classroom, we're going to do our offering. This is a way every week that we practice our spiritual value of generosity. Half of undesignated gifts are donated to a local cause, which resonates with Unitarian Universalist values. If you're online or prefer to use your smartphone, you can use the link or the QR code that are provided. For November, our Share the Plate recipient is Youth Emergency Services, also known as YES. YES serves homeless and at-risk youth by providing critically needed resources that empower them to become self-sufficient. This is a group that we also have some support with from this congregation in making a meal once a month. So if you're interested in getting involved in that ministry, you can let staff know. For learning more about YES, you can go to yesomaha.org. Thank you for giving generously. Each week we take time to share those things that are bringing either sunshine or rain into our lives. When we share those things that are making us joyful, bringing brightness. We share that brightness with others as well. And when we share the things that are challenging or frustrating or making us sad, our community can offer its care. I want to mention a couple of items as Colin is coming up here. One is that we have some cards downstairs in the common room during coffee hour after the service that are for our homebound members to wish them a happy Thanksgiving. So if you'd like to sign one of those or write on a little note, please do. I also want to acknowledge that Transgender Day of Remembrance was earlier this week, and we mourn the lives of all those lost to anti-trans violence.
From Mary K. Peters and Della Gushin, saying, thanks, joyful for the use of the common room last night for a rite of passage ceremony for local red tent group in Omaha, a beautiful ceremony and space.
Will you sing with me, number 391? For our contemplation this morning, I invite you to recall a time in your life when you've been party to a loss of trust. Perhaps trust was broken in a big, life-changing way. Perhaps it was some small neglect or thoughtless choice that frayed the fabric of trust. You might have been in error, or perhaps someone else hurt you. Trust might have been diminished in a family relationship, a friendship, a workplace, or a community of care, like a congregation. I'll give you a moment to pause and reflect on your own experience of trust betrayed, and perhaps, any courageous steps that were taken to restore that trust. Rebuilding trust takes patience, care, and intentionality. Like a braid that has come undone, unraveled trust is rewoven, one action at a time, one strand over strand at a time. I'm going to invite some helpers up, and if you'd like, you can open the baggie that you got on your way in and gather together 3 strands, if you have yarn, at one end, and you can tie it to the little circle, or you can make a knot, whatever you want to do with that. If you have pipe cleaners in your baggie, you might just crimp them all together at one end. And then I invite you to braid your threads. And Kira and Jay are going to demonstrate here if you aren't familiar with braiding. You put them 3 in a row, and you take one side and fold it over the middle so that it becomes the new middle. And then you take the other side and you fold it over what's now the middle, and then it becomes the middle. And you continue going back and forth like that as you reweave your braid. Now don't worry if your braid is not perfectly neat. Reweaving trust can be messy, so that's actually realistic. And don't feel rushed. We're going to have a minute of music now, but you can go slowly, take as long as you need, and continue weaving those strands indefinitely.
Our reading is adapted from Healers, Teachers, Angels, and it is by Sue Ferguson, a Unitarian Universalist in Colorado. Trust is critical to progress on a spiritual path, but it doesn't come easily for some of us. I learned a little bit about it while I was living in Japan. Returning to Japan from a work trip to the States was often a harrowing 24-hour ordeal. But on this trip, I had missed my usual bus ride from Tokyo to my home and needed to take the train. It was almost midnight when I got to Mammoth Shinjuku Station, and the last train was about to leave. Navigating a foreign metro train station can be daunting, but this time my fatigue must have given me a deer-in-the-headlights look, because as I was gazing at the confusing train board, a man came up to me and asked, in perfect English, where I was going. When I told him that I needed the Odaku line, he immediately grabbed my rather large suitcase and began heading off into the depths of the station. Was this a good idea? I wondered. Can I trust him? In my exhaustion, I followed the stranger to the correct train, where he rushed forward without me. I've lost my suitcase for sure, I thought to myself, but kept going and realized that he had rushed in order to secure a seat for me and a place for my suitcase on that practically full last train. With a slight bow, he backed off the train. That was the last I saw of him. His act of kindness and compassion left a lasting impression on me. To this day, I think of that stranger as an angel effortlessly moving me along the path I needed to follow at a time when I might not have been able to do it for myself. The memory reminds me that if I'm not cultivating an open heart and watching for the helpers, the teachers, and the angels, people I can trust to be there for me, I may miss them when I need them the most. I end this quote that Ferguson includes from James Hillman. It is impossible to see the angel unless you first have a notion of it.
Trust is critical to progress on a spiritual path, wrote Sue Ferguson, but it doesn't come easily for some of us. I wonder how many here can relate to Ferguson's hesitance to trust. We humans are relational beings. We cannot survive and thrive without caring, cooperative relationships with others. Yet to extend trust, we must expose our soft, vulnerable underbelly. No wonder that when trust is betrayed, the relational wound can go deep. For much of my life, I've been someone who instinctively trusted others. I grew up with loving, reliable caregivers, so my foundation of trust was strong as I entered into adulthood. Later, though, there was one significant period when trust did not come so easily to me. I was in my 30s by that time, and life had eroded my trusting nature. It showed in my romantic life. That's when I really realized something had shifted for me. I started dating someone that I met online, the way so many romances start these days. Going slow makes sense when a relationship starts from zero, from strangers, and I did go slowly. My nervous system knew pretty quickly, though, I could feel in my body that this guy was trustworthy. On our second date, I drove up to his city, and when he greeted me, he gave me an unhurried hug that just felt so safe and grounding. And if you've been around here for a while and you know me, you know I'm a hugger. I think on some level, this is when I knew that this was someone I could potentially get serious with. He gave hugs like my trustworthy father. But as our relationship unfolded over weeks and then months, approaching a year, I continued to take my time. My boyfriend was ready to pick up the pace. Neither of us was young. I was 34, he was 43. If parenting was going to be part of our lives, there wasn't much time to waste. So he was ready to make long-term plans, to really commit. He wanted to know where I stood in this relationship. And I was a bit frozen in uncertainty. I continued to move slowly in our couplehood. At one point, my partner became impatient with my dawdling. And I thought, is he going to walk away? Is this going to be it? Maybe you've been the person who found it hard to trust and who felt impatient with or hurt by another's lack of parent commitment. Or a person who could trust, like my boyfriend in that situation. Or maybe you've been like I was in that situation, a person who found it hard to trust in someone else, or maybe to trust your own powers of discernment. It takes courage to trust, because trust means vulnerability. It means risking being let down by those you trust. For someone who's been hurt or betrayed before, it's not only the specific relationship involved, which was harmed, that person's underlying capacity to trust may also have been affected. As for me and my younger self's dating relationship, well, it's only in the past couple of years that I've come to understand more deeply what it was that had diminished my capacity to trust. You want to know the backstory? There's always a backstory, right? In my late 20s, I got involved in a community that gave me reasons to feel safe there, warm people that seemed to genuinely care about me, spiritual practices that added comfort, grounding, meaning, and personal insight into my daily life. There were fun times together, talking and laughing over meals or during shared recreation. I moved gradually closer to that group, which was a meditation community, over a period of years, both in my level of participation and in how much it was a part of my identity. It influenced major choices I made in my personal life, including work and relationships. Eventually, I moved into the heart of that spiritual community, transplanting myself from the Midwest to the West Coast to work for the Meditation Center. But when I got close, my sense of stability within that group quickly began to erode. In fact, I began to feel distinctly unsafe. Things were not as sunny as they had seemed from a distance. Once I was in the thick of things, my experience was that direct communication there seemed to be taboo or threatening. And it took so long, mysteriously, to get something done within the structure of the organization. Why was that? And surprisingly to me, members of that spiritual community did not in real life consistently exhibit the qualities that they were ostensibly teaching others through their organization, things like an unhurried mind or self-acceptance. I didn't understand why the community behaved the way that it did, but I could feel the toll that it was taking on my body, emotions, and spirit. And I feel like the kids are kind of demonstrating that toll right now in the noise that they are making. People who I thought I was close to displayed a deficit of trust, and not only in others around them, but specifically in me. There was a disconnect between what was actually happening around them and how they responded. Well, eventually, this secretive, distrusting, stultifying climate of that meditation community got to me, to the point that I realized that for my own well-being, I needed to get out of there. All of the signals that community had given me that it was a place of safety, connection, and growth, a place in which I might flourish and make positive contributions. It turned out those signals had been deeply misleading. And so when I left that California community and returned to the Midwest, I brought with me confusion about whether I could believe what my own experience was telling me. Sure, I felt instinctively safe with my new boyfriend, but was this really going to work out? I'd been wrong about people before. How could I be sure I was right about this guy? Perhaps you've been close to a person or community whose behavior turned out to be inconsistent, confusing, even downright harmful. Rupturing of trust happens in families. It happens in friendships. It happens in communities. It's happened, sadly, it looks to me, in the body politic of our nation. A betrayal of trust can be devastating no matter the context, because trust is the foundation of all relationships. Without it, those relationships can't really create and sustain authentic connection. Such a betrayal goes especially deep in a place that was supposed to be safe, as when a parent or guardian harms a child in their care, or when a religious community fails to protect anyone in it from abuses of power. Relational traumas like these impact not only the person directly affected, the child abused or neglected, the partner assaulted or cheated on, the group member deceived or manipulated. Betrayals of trust can also affect whole communities. What I've come to understand about my old meditation community 20 years later is that its capacity for trust, for true reciprocity and straightforward communication, had been damaged long before I arrived on the scene. Just as the trust barrier between me and my boyfriend wasn't really about him. The meditation community's slowness to trust me and all the young people of my generation that they drew out there was never about us. It was about the fabric of trust in that community that had been ripped apart decades before, which had never healed. You see, I've learned just in the past couple of years that the founder of my old group misused his power. He betrayed the trust of vulnerable people, using them to gratify his own ego. And he was never held accountable for the harm that he did. Instead, it was pretended away by people who could not face what it would mean about their beloved teacher. I believe now, with what I've learned, that this is what poisoned the well of trust in that community. It was betrayals that had been buried. As can happen in any community disrupted by such relational trauma, not everyone stayed. Before my time, some people who came to terms with the truth left the group because most people were either unable or unwilling to grapple with what had happened. And by the time I got involved with the community, the teacher had died, he wasn't around anymore, and there were newer people involved who had never been there for the original breaches of trust. And like me, they had no idea what had happened. New people coming into a community with that kind of history can learn by osmosis, through the social conditioning of others, how to fit in and survive there in a community built on a shaky foundation of trust. It takes courage to mend old relationships or to build new ones when trust has been damaged. It takes courage to face the hurt of betrayal. About 6 weeks ago, while I was in California on a trip, I made a decision, kind of spontaneously, to visit the ashram where I had had those confusing experiences that shook my capacity to trust. I felt that it could be healing for me to see the community through the eyes of my new understanding of what had happened there a long time before I was there. I gathered the courage before I reached out about visiting the meditation center. I knew that I would not be able to control how others related to me. And I wasn't actually trying to mend my relationship with them. In that case, experience had suggested to me that they were unable or unwilling to deal with the unsavory truths about their beloved teacher, much less to acknowledge how later generations might have been harmed by the coercive dynamics. And that's an important point. It's not always possible to rebuild trust. It takes all parties being willing to come to the table. And if you're someone who's harmed, you're not obligated to do that, right? After deep betrayal, you might choose not to try. Anyway, as I went there to that community, my goal was to honor the grief and pain of my younger self. Like so many who had gone there over half a century, I had been used and disillusioned by that community. I think anyone whose trust has been betrayed in whatever kind of relationship deserves to have that pain recognized and cared for. As I drove onto the ashram grounds for the first time in almost 20 years, I felt grounded in my own values and truth. The strength of others who had come and gone from that ashram like me was with me, people who had commiserated and shared together our experiences. And I needed their strength, because returning to the site of ruptured relationships can make a person feel vulnerable all over again. For me, going back was cathartic of my pain and grief. It was affirming of how much I have healed over the past couple of decades since I left there. Because after visiting the grounds and visiting with a leader there, I left feeling in my whole self, my own soundness of being. It was very different than how I'd felt the previous time that I left there. I drove away knowing in my bones that their distrust of me and their failure to be worthy of the trust that I offered them, those were never really about me. Instead, their failure to trust and to be trustworthy reflected that community's own unhealed relational trauma. I'm trustworthy, and there are many others who are worthy of my trust as well, and many of you are right here in this room. Whatever you have been through, I suspect that you are trustworthy too. And I'm certain that there are many others who will live up to your trust, even if there are people in the past who didn't. I invite you to take a deep breath if that feels right to you. And if you like, if it works with your pipes or your yarn, you might need some assistance. You might put it on your own wrist and wear it like a bracelet. Or if you've got the yarns and you put them on a loop, you could use that loop to put it on the end of a zipper or a keychain or something like that. Well, I'm still a curious person spiritually. I don't know if I'll ever want to check out another group similar to the one I used to be involved in. I feel like a little cautious about the spiritual marketplace of our nation. And I feel like I have all I need within our tradition of Unitarian Universalism. Which is not to say that our tradition has been immune to the sort of dynamics I've been talking about. It hasn't. As we were heard in the Time for All Ages, we can make mistakes. We can do things that might undermine trust with others. Day in and day out, it's part of being human. And when that happens, we can choose to, rebuild that trust. Put that block back into the covenant tower. No tradition, of course, is immune to these dynamics. There are pitfalls of being human that can show up everywhere. But I do feel good about my chosen faith in this regard. Unitarian Universalists have been doing intentional work at a national level to nurture health in our communities, to delineate clear standards for behavior, to prevent breaches of trust, and when trust is betrayed, to hold people accountable and work to repair the harm. Healing takes a long time in communities, but my sense is that we're on a constructive course. Now, I recognize that my experience of trust was in an alternative kind of spiritual setting, and there may be people here who have had hurtful experiences in more mainstream religious communities, like congregations. I have tremendous empathy for anyone who has experienced betrayal in a place that was especially supposed to be safe for them, or by a person who was especially supposed to be trustworthy, like a religious leader. And I witness how much courage it takes for such a person, after being hurt, individually or as part of a community, to set foot in a church again, or even to step into leadership in a community with this kind of history. So if that's you, I honor your courage to be here. So we humans are relational beings. Trust is the foundation of our relationships. Sometimes our trust is betrayed in individual relationships or community. And when that happens, it can repattern our relationships away from trust, with far-reaching ripple effects in our lives, be it in how we respond to a helpful stranger in the train station, or to a new significant other, or to a new spiritual community, or a new religious leader. The big question, of course, is then, how do we heal from damaged trust? How do we reweave this webbing that makes all relationships possible? We can develop the conditions for recovery by finding or creating pockets of safety and care. That's one step. When I left the meditation community back in 2006 and came back to the Midwest, I mostly returned to existing relationships that felt safe for me. Being with my UU church community and with my old friends in my familiar city, that provided conditions for healing for me. And when I was stable again, I summoned the courage to try to find someone who might be my life partner. Working with a professional can also be very helpful in restoring our capacity to trust. The relationship between a patient and a therapist can be the crucible in which the ability to trust is rebuilt. Perhaps this is why the quality of the relationship between a patient and therapist, the trust, is more important for a patient's progress than the specific therapy philosophies or techniques that a therapist uses. The hard, slow work of rebuilding trust happens in daily life, too. Just as Each strand of a braid is woven one crossover at a time to form something strong. In our day-to-day relationships, including those with new people, there's no substitute for repeatedly providing reliable and honest interactions and operating in good faith with one another. And when a community has suffered tears to the warp and weft of trust that upholds it, what creates healing on a communal level? As we saw in the Time for All Ages with the Jingle Blocks, relational health can be nurtured by creating covenants of right relationships, by putting into words how we're going to try to be together, and what behaviors are appropriate and what are not. Living into those covenants together is an ongoing practice, and we'll inevitably make mistakes sometimes. Being in right relationship means coming back into covenant in good faith when that happens, putting those blocks back when something has happened. For a community that was harmed specifically by a leader, broken trust can also be repaired by carefully building a trusting relationship with a new leader. If the new leader proves to be reliable, to have healthy boundaries, to be collaborative and not misuse their power, a community may begin to mend the fabric of trust. As happened in my relationship with my boyfriend, trust grew gradually through the accumulation of shared experiences. It takes however long it takes. Some communities that are healing, like individuals, find support from people who are trained and skilled in healing relational trauma to be helpful too. Well, I've left you hanging. Are you wondering what happened with that boyfriend? Okay. So I left the meditation center, came back to my old friends and community, started dating. Well, that boyfriend, he of the comforting hugs, was patient. He was sure about me. And lucky for me, he let me take the time that I needed to realize that I could, in fact, trust my instincts about him. He let me take the time I needed to regain confidence in my own powers of judgment. William and I got married in 2009, and we did start a family. She is 16 and at the back of the sanctuary right now. So that was a story of rebuilding trust that had a happy ending in my personal life. I try to remember this personal experience, and maybe you'll remember yours, when I find myself in any kind of relationship with a person or community that finds it hard to trust. There's always a reason for it. It may not really be about me, but it doesn't come out of nowhere. And the only way to heal that disconnect and rebuild confidence for healthy, mutually supportive relationships is with patience and care. For every person listening, I wish relationships of care and reciprocity that prove worthy of your trust. Day in and day out, may each of us be mindful to weave the strands of trust in our families and friendships, in our communities, and in the wider world. May we act in good faith with one another, and may we be rewarded with relationships that support us, that help us to grow and flourish. So may it be. Amen. I invite you to rise for a closing hymn, number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath. invite you to, actually, if you want to stay standing, that's fine. More of you are standing. Why don't we stand? I invite you, if you're comfortable with it, to take the hand of someone near you, and you might have to scooch a little bit. If you prefer not to, you can hold your own hand just like this. The hand in yours belongs to a person. Hang on to it. The hand in yours belongs to a person whose heart is sometimes tender, whose skin is sometimes thin, whose eyes sometimes fill with tears, and whose laughter is a beautiful sound. The hand that you hold belongs to a person who is seeking wholeness and trust that you are doing the same. As you leave this sanctuary, may your hearts remain open, may your voices remain strong, and may your hands remain outstretched. Go in peace.